Hello. Today I'd like to talk about heating and cooling and some things that irk me about this topic, and demonstrate a lack of understanding of what heat is and how it's transferred. First, a little physics refresher. Temperature is a measure of the average kinetic energy of the particles. If they are moving faster, on average, then the object is warm. If the particles are moving slower, the object is colder, it's cooler. Fast-moving particles interacting with slow-moving particles will transfer some of their kinetic energy, making the hot object colder and the cold object warmer. If the difference between the object's temperature is larger, the transfer of energy will be faster. Also, it takes energy to convert liquid water into gaseous water. We're familiar with the concept of boiling, right? But this happens with evaporation as well. Now, the rate of evaporation depends on temperature and the humidity. And humidity is the amount of water particles in the air above the water. Energy can also be transferred by radiation. Wiggling particles give off and can receive radiation energy, so a hot object, even in the vacuum without being able to touch any other particles, would still cool down. Room temperature objects emit infrared light, for example, which is a type of electromagnetic radiation. Another example is we can be warmed by the sun by its mostly visible light, even though there's the vacuum of space between us and the sun. Another way heat can be transferred is just by moving the heat. An air conditioner, fridge, or heat pump all do this. So this is a process of transferring by direct contact and then moving a fluid or moving a gas. To summarize, and to add in a few terms, heat can be transferred by contact of particles. We call this conduction. Heat can be used to evaporate liquid. We call this process evaporation. Heat can be transferred by light. We call this electromagnetic radiation or just radiation. Heat can be transferred by a combination of contact and then moving the stuff. This process is sometimes called convection. And in the case of an air conditioner and fridge, there's also a conversion from one form to another. In general, the larger the temperature difference, the faster the energy transfer. And that's true for pretty much all forms of heat transfer. Now we can get to my complaints. First, fans on in an empty room for the purpose of cooling. Fans can be great for cooling. Imagine you're hot and sweating in a room with still air. The air right above your skin will be roughly the same temperature as your skin, and your sweat will hardly be evaporating because the first beads of sweat that have evaporated have saturated the still air above your skin with water particles, slowing evaporation. Now, add in a cool breeze from a fan. Well, just a breeze from a fan, moving air from a fan. Now there's fresh air against your skin, speeding up evaporation and conduction because now you have cooler, drier air right next to your skin. Not only that, if you have an open window and door, the fan can help replace the hot air in the room with fresh air from outside. Now, there are people out there who will turn on a fan in a closed room for the purpose of cooling it down, even if they aren't in that room. Let's think about this. Arguably, this may even heat up the room. The energy running the fan, let's say it's 40 watts, will ultimately 100% be converted into heat through friction and electrical resistance. So your 40-watt fan is pumping 40 joules per second basically into the room. Now, it could also heat the room in other ways. For example, it may be moving the air in the room, replacing the hot air near the window with cooler air from the room center, increasing the overall heating of the room. It just drives me crazy though. Just point the fan at yourself or use the fan to exchange the room's air, play to the fan's strengths. Similarly, I'm also not a fan of these evaporative coolers that work by evaporating water, and it makes the air more humid, hence why they have the nickname of a swamp cooler. More humid air is just going to impede your body's evaporative cooling, and you may have to run an actual air conditioner to dehumidify the air. The next one bothers me even more, and it's so pervasive in how Canadian homes are designed and built. It is normal to have baseboard heaters installed along the walls, in particular under windows. The walls are what separates your home from the cold. The larger the temperature difference, the faster the heat loss, and by heating the walls first, it ensures the walls are the hottest part of the room, maximizing heat loss. Even worse when you think about the under window ones, where the insulation factor is probably the worst. And insulation doesn't stop heat loss, it just slows it down. So how should homes be heated? Well, heat the center of the room first, and target the heat to what you want to keep warm. Let the walls get chilly. That will minimize heat losses. Although arguably not the most efficient way of heating a home, electric heaters are 100% efficient at turning electrical energy into heat. By using a little electric heater for the center of the room or under your desk, right next to you, instead of using your baseboard heaters, you'll find that you'll be warmer and you will see a small difference on your heating bill. Now, I also really like radiation-based heating because that will heat your skin and clothing directly instead of the air. Our Montreal apartment, we kept around 10 degrees Celsius, but the radiation type heater kept me almost sweating hot, or at least the side of my body, facing it. I even got a rare, temporary, and it wasn't painful, skin condition called erythema igni. And it went away. It's not a big deal. But there is a limit to how much you should rely on it. There's an upper limit. Maybe I'll talk about heating blankets too. If you put one over yourself, half the heat radiates to the outside of the blanket. That you're wasting half the energy. It makes more sense to put a heating pad under the blanket. I never slept comfortably in Canada until I figured out to sleep with a heating pad on my feet all night. Thank you for listening to my rant. I hope you learned something, and I hope you stay cooler in the summer and stay warmer in the winter. Cheers. Now, I'll admit, if you do place the heater at the edge of the house, you get these natural convection currents set up to uniformly heat the room, or have the room have the most uniform temperature. So is your goal to have a uniformly warm room, or are you trying to save electricity and trying to keep the center of the room warm? For myself, I'm sort of obsessed with efficiency, and I'm very cheap and frugal. So for myself, the way things are designed, I hate it. And for myself, I would minimize losses.